The Bucs get a lot of help on both sides of the ball in a recent 7-round mock draft. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs. Credential member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. We're going to do dueling mock drafts later on this episode. But let's start things off with a 7-round mock draft from ESPN's Matt Miller, where he takes an interesting approach for the Bucs, but ultimately, I think it pays off. I mean, it's not perfect, but this is one of the better mocks that I have seen for the Bucs so far. Now, last week, I did talk about how I was not a fan of the Bucs going with a safety in the first round, but that's exactly where Matt Miller started off on this one at pick 19 with James Pierce, Shamar Stewart, Trey Amos, Donovan Ezeraku still all on the board. Miller has the Bucs taking Georgia safety Malachi Starks. Miller said, quote, "The Buccaneers held their offense together in free agency, re-signing wide receiver Chris Godwin and guard Ben Bredeson, but they must patch some holes on defense. There's a big one at free safety where undrafted free agent Christian Izien is currently their projected starter. Starks started all 3 of his seasons at Georgia and played all over the secondary, but his best ball came at free safety in 2023. His instincts and quickness in space make him an ideal deep safety, and he hauled in 5 interceptions in that alignment in his first 2 seasons. He had to play out of position as a slot corner this past season, but when looking at his safety highlights from 2022-2023, it's easy to see Starks being a top-level NFL starter," end quote. Now, I have to say that I obviously disagree that the projected starter is Christian Izien. As of now, it seems as though Tyke Smith is going to be the starter back at safety, which is where he played at Georgia. And then, Izien would play slot corner. Now, if this is the selection for the Bucs, I would think that Tyke would switch back to slot corner, and then Izien provides outstanding depth at both safety and corner. As for Starks, like Miller mentioned, he's a 3-year starter at Georgia. He had 17 career pass breakups, 6 interceptions, and an All-American nod. He is the best tackler among all of the safety prospects, and that's something that the Bucs could definitely use. But Miller nails it. Stark's best season across the board came in 2023 when he was the free safety. Now, while I don't love the idea of safety in the first round, it's like I've told all of you before, it's about the collective, not the individual pick. So we have to see where things shake out in the rest of this mock draft. In the second round, Miller has the Bucs taking Notre Dame corner Benjamin Morrison, saying, quote, "The Bucs double up in the secondary, going with an outside corner here after taking Malachi Starks in round 1. A 3-year starter, Morrison missed 10 games this past season with a hip injury and has not tested in the pre-draft process. When he was on the field, Morrison produced, posting 9 interceptions combined in 2022 and 2023. At 6 foot, 193 pounds, he has the size and length to be effective in press situations. There are questions about his injury and tape that already showed some tightness in his transitions, but Morrison has the tools to be a starter, especially in a zone-heavy scheme," end quote. Todd Bowles runs a lot of zone. I'm not going to harp on this pick. You guys know how I feel about the selection of Morrison. I don't think he'll be there, but it's a slam dunk if he is great value for the Bucs. Moving on to the third round, Miller stays with the defense, taking edge rusher Jack Sawyer out of Ohio State, the master of the scoop and score and a ball hawk at the edge position. Miller says, quote, Sawyer is the ultimate big game performer who has the tools to play outside linebacker in the Bucs 3-4 scheme, end quote. So in the first 2 days, the Bucs upgrade the secondary and upgrade the edge rush rotation. As much as you all know that I hate the Buckeyes, I do like Jack Sawyer a lot. As an NFL prospect, he definitely has a knack to elevate his play under the brightest lights possible. Adding him in with Yaya, Hassan Reddick, Anthony Nelson, Chris Braswell, I think that makes the rotation as a whole light years better than what it was last year. That's another really good pick for the Buccaneers. Day 3, things get a little interesting, but Miller starts the Bucs off with a bang in the 4th round, taking linebacker Chris Paul Jr. This is a player that we've talked about as early as the 2nd round. He's sitting there in the 4th round in this particular mock draft. He's a plug-and-play starting linebacker that they would be getting on day 3. We're talking about a similar impact on the defensive side that Bucky Irving brought on the offensive side last year out of that same round. That's a perfect example, though, of how quickly this draft can change when it comes to how all these prospects are clumped together. Round 2 guys in these current mock drafts could be taken in round 4 and vice versa, because the talent is so good and is so deep. It's just not elite. And that's something I'm going to continue to harp on. Not everyone is an everydayer. Not everyone hears me talk about that on every show. So I want to make sure all of you understand that while the elite prospects are few, and they're all going to be taken within the top 12 to 15 picks in this draft, the really, really good talent is all clumped together, which is why you could potentially find starters into round 5 if, depending on the position. So for Paul Jr., 24 pressures, 6 sacks, 10 hurries, forced fumble, 4 passes defensed, and a defensive touchdown just last year alone for Ole Miss. This is a blitzing linebacker that can allow Levante to be the coverage guy in the run stopper where he's at his best. That said, Paul can also drop back into coverage. He's coming off of his best season in coverage and in pass rush. That's another home run pick for the Bucs. In the 5th, Miller has the Bucs taking Arkansas receiver Isaac Tesla. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce that one, but 545 yards and 3 touchdowns on 28 receptions last season, averaged just under 20 yards per reception. He's 6'4", 220, runs a 4.43 40. I love the idea of adding a guy here that has some speed to him, that can also contribute on special teams. You can continue to develop a little bit to potentially become that wide receiver 4 or that wide receiver 5 for this team. But special teams implications immediately for a rookie wide receiver in the 5th round. In the 7th, he has the Bucs going with tight end Robbie Oots out of Alabama. Now, I can't say that I love this idea. They just took a tight end in the 7th round last year. They appear to be pretty set at the position with Otten, Durham, Culp, and Kieft. From the guys that were still left, I might have gone with Georgia defensive tackle Nazir Stackhouse, maybe UNC center Willie Lampkin with that pick, but I realize you're in the 7th round. These are kind of dart throws. But I just don't, of all the positions to take, I would not have taken a tight end there. But ultimately, the Bucs end up with Starks, a starting safety, Morrison, a starting corner, Sawyer, a rotational edge rusher, Paul Jr., starting linebacker, Tesla, a speedy receiver that can play special teams, and then Oots to join the tight end room. And other than that last pick, this is a pretty perfect mock draft. And even though I've told you all that I don't like the idea of safety in the 1st round, I really like this draft as a whole. It addresses every big need they have on the defensive side of the ball. It gives Baker another weapon on offense that would likely, maybe not this year, but going into 2026 is going to take over Trey Palmer's role. Again, you get the special teams help there. So overall, I think Matt Miller did a really, really good job with this mock. I think that would be a draft haul that we would be excited to talk about here in just a couple of weeks when the NFL draft is all done. Dueling mock drafts from yours truly. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, even who's cutting down the nets. The Final Four is set, and although there aren't any Cinderella stories left in this year's Final Four, without a doubt, this is going to be the four best teams in college basketball going head to head for a chance to win the national championship. Duke is still the favorite at plus 110, followed by the Florida Gators at plus 270. And then Houston and Auburn are both sitting at plus 450. The FanDuel app is super easy to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around for those winnings to show up. Visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, this is going to be fun. Let's kick back and enjoy this a little bit, because here's how my dueling mock drafts today are going to go. One of them is going to be straight up with the stipulation that I have to take a member of the secondary in the first round. So at pick 19, no matter what, I'm taking either a corner or a safety. Now, the one that we're going to do right now is not straight up. And the stipulation is I have to trade out of every original pick that the Buccaneers have. I can move up, I can move down, but I have to trade out of all of the Bucs' current picks. So let's go ahead and let's get this party started. At pick 19, Malachi Starks is there. Jahad Campbell is there. James Pierce Jr. is there. Jahdae Barron is there. But I have to trade. I have offers on the table from Minnesota, Detroit, and Washington. But Washington is offering 29, 61, and a 2026 third for picks 19 and 157. So that gets me out of two original Buccaneers picks. It gives me an additional pick in the top 75 and a pick for next year. I would rather have that top 100 pick than one after 150. So we're going to move back to pick 29 with the Washington Commanders. At 29, I'm taking Donovan Ezraku to add to the edge rush rotation. This is a guy that has been mocked to the Bucs a lot. At 19, I get to slide back 10 spots, pick up pick 61 and another pick next year. Get him at 29. I'm going to take that all day long. Great value there at 29. In the second round, I make a move up. I give up pick 53, the Bucs' 7th round pick, and the pick that we got from Washington in order to get to pick 45 with the Indianapolis Colts. So I now have gotten out of two of the Bucs' original picks, but I did that so that I could take safety Xavier Watts. I've addressed edge. I've addressed safety now with a ball hawk on the back end that can also line up at outside corner. He can line up at slot corner. He can move all over the secondary. I love the idea of Xavier Watts being on this football team in Todd Bowles' defense. And now I'm right back on the clock at 61 because of that trade with Washington in the first round. Now here, I don't have to trade because this is not one of the Bucs' original picks, but the Saints offered me 71 and 112 in order to move up to 61. And since I just gave up the 7th round pick, I'm going to take that deal and I'm going to add yet another pick in the top 125 in order to make up for the fact that I just gave away the Bucs' final pick in this draft. So I still have a top 75 pick, moving back 10 spots. Now I have an additional pick in the top 115. At 71, I'm taking linebacker Chris Paul Jr. Lots of defensive players flying off the board. I love Paul's fit next to Levante. That, to me, is worth the price of pick 71. Now, at 84, this is one of the ones that I have to move out of. I have one trade offer from the Chargers where I give them 84 and a 2026 7th for 86 and 158. We're going to take that. It's the only offer on the table. So moving back 2 spots at 86, I'm going to roll with defensive tackle TJ Sanders out of South Carolina. No corners here that I really love for the Bucs. The best available is Dorian Strong from Virginia Tech, but I put him kind of in the same tier as a lot of other corners that are still available. So I want to beef up the defensive line rotation with a player that is sliding. Strong was the 65th ranked prospect available. I get him 21 spots later at pick 86. A little bit of a wait now for our next pick, which is 112. And this was the pick that we got in the trade with the Saints. I'm going to hold here since I can, and I'm going to take Ohio State corner Jordan Hancock. He's got a RAS score of 9.84. He fits the size profile that Todd Bowles looks for in his corners. He's not an immediate starter. So you're looking at Jamel Dean still being with the team. That's perfectly fine. You have Dean and McCollum as your starting corners, but now you have a guy that is going to provide depth. He's going to provide a rotational role. By the end of the season, going into 2026, he's likely going to be your starting outside corner opposite of Zion McCollum. At 121, the Packers have offered picks 124 and 198 for 121 and a 2026 sixth round pick. We have to take that. It's the only offer on the table. At 24, this one's fun. I'm taking TCU receiver Savion Williams, 6'3", 225. He's a little bit raw, but he's going to fit in really well to the receiver room. You don't need a ton from him right out the gate. So this is a guy that you can kind of slowly bring along and slowly develop, kind of the way McMillan did last year. Now, McMillan's development was stunted a little bit by missing some time with injuries. With Williams, you can allow that to be a gradual ascent. Then we're talking, the home stretch, the final quarter of the season. He's going to become a bigger and bigger part of this offense. I really like this pick for the Bucs to add some help. I don't think Trey Palmer's that dude. I think the Bucs are going to try to address wide receiver. Todd Bowles came out and said that he's looking at receivers in this draft. On the clock again at 158. We're still looking for depth. We're still looking for special teams contributions at this point, trying to beef up some of these positions where the Bucs either lost some depth or the depth that they had last year was on the weaker side. I'm going Cincinnati guard Luke Kandra, 6'4", 320. Kandra is a super athletic lineman that dominated last season for the Bearcats. 0 sacks, only 8 pressures allowed in 447 pass blocking snaps. This is the kind of player now that the Bucs can cross-train at center. He can be that swing interior lineman, providing depth across all 3 spots of the interior offensive line. He can learn and grow to be a backup to Graham Barton if, God forbid, something happens there. Kandra also ranks as one of the better second-level blockers among interior linemen in run blocking. So, this is a guy that can get to that second level. He can clear space for Bucky. He can clear space for Rashad. Love this pick for the Buccaneers. Brings some great, much needed depth along the offensive line. And then that brings us to our last pick, number 198. Here, still the same mindset. Solid depth, good attributes, maybe contribute on special teams, develop. I'm taking Cal corner Noel Williams. He's played over 3,300 snaps in his career, and he has lined up at outside corner, slot corner, and free safety in his time in college. That's good depth across the entire secondary, and likely right out of the gate, he's a gunner on special teams. You hope that he can develop and turn into a weapon on the defense, but at the very least, you now have more depth in the secondary, which was nowhere close to good enough last season. So the final result is edge rusher Donovan Ezeraku at 29 after the trade down. I trade up to 45 for safety Xavier Watts, trade down to get linebacker Chris Paul Jr. at 71, move back a couple of spots to take defensive tackle TJ Sanders at 86, cornerback Jordan Hancock at 112, wide receiver Savion Williams at 124, guard Luke Kandra at 158, and then cornerback Noel Williams at 198. That means the Bucs go from 6 total picks in the draft to 8, and then from 3 in the top 100 and 4 in the top 125 to 4 in the top 100 and 6 in the top 125. We've built a ton of depth in the secondary with guys that have played across multiple positions. I love the flexibility that now gives Todd Bowles in this defense. But now let's stand pat and force a player from the secondary to go to the Bucs in the first round to see how the rest shakes out. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on a mock draft madness Monday episode of Locked On Bucs. And mock draft part 2 is where we sit still. No trades. Doesn't matter what they offer. We're not trading. We are staying where the Bucs are supposed to draft. But I have to take a player in the secondary at pick number 19. So let's kick this off. The best players available here at 19 are Malachi Starks, then Xavier Watts, Trey Amos, Siobhan Revel, Maxwell Hairston. The obvious pick is Malachi Starks. I love Xavier Watts. I really, really like Revel and Amos, but they are not on the same level as Starks, especially in the first round. That's who we're going to go with. And then at 53, we have Braden Swinson, Jack Sawyer, Jared Ivey at edge. We got Benjamin Morrison, Darian Porter, Azariah Thomas are the corners available. Omar Norman Lott and CJ West are available there along the defensive line. I got to go with Benjamin Morrison here. So far, this is looking a lot like Matt Miller's mock that we talked about in that first segment. Back-to-back picks in the secondary, both being Starks and Morrison to add to this Bucs defense. But now we get to 84. Elijah Roberts is the top-ranked edge rusher. Jordan Phillips is the top-ranked defensive lineman. Savion Williams is there, who I just talked about in my trade mock. Jared Wilson, the center from Georgia, is there. That's a guy that you can bring in. He already has the experience at center. You can cross-train him to guard now, so you have your swing interior lineman. Jeffrey Bassa is there. I feel like I can get defensive line and linebacker a little bit later. Receiver, I can go, if I go in that direction, I can get one of those a little bit later. I think the drop off here from Elijah Roberts to the next best edge rusher is pretty steep. So I'm going to address the edge rusher. I'm going to take Elijah Roberts here in the third round. And then this ended up playing out really, really well for me. Going into the fourth round, I have Isaiah Bond, the wide receiver from Texas, sitting there. Barrett Carter, he's available to fill the linebacker need. JJ Pegues is a good defensive lineman that I can snag to add to that rotation. But there's no reason that Bond should be here. There's no reason he should have dropped all the way to pick 121. He should be taken in the top 100. His speed alone would justify someone taking him in the top 50. But elite speed, he's not very big. This is a special teamer immediately as far as a return man. It's a deep threat for Baker Mayfield. I have to roll with Isaiah Bond. I think we would all regret it if I didn't. At 157, things are thinning out dramatically on the defensive side of the ball. We have a safety, we have a corner, we have an edge. Kobe King, the linebacker from Penn State, is here, and he is coming off back-to-back impressive seasons for the Nittany Lions. He's not great in coverage, but his run defense is off the charts. Pass rush has room for improvement, but he has shown the ability to get into the backfield and disrupt the quarterback. Levante, he can be the coverage guy. Give me Kobe King to come in and be part of a platoon there with the linebackers. You have Anthony Walker. You have Servassier Dennis. You add Kobe King to the mix in the fifth round. I really like this pick for Todd Bowles' defense. And then we got to wait all the way until the seventh round. At 235, it's best player remaining. I could go offensive line, running back. I could do another defensive pick on the defensive side of the ball. But, I really like Montrell Jordan Johnson, the running back out of Florida. He is not going to threaten the top three running backs in the Bucs rotation, but they do need another guy there. You can't run with just three running backs. If injuries happen, things start to go wrong, you're going to need an additional guy. The Bucs got away with it last year. You don't want to continue to play with fire. He's a solid runner. He's decent at catching the ball out of the backfield. He can be slippery and tough to bring down, averaged nearly 3.5 yards per carry after contact last season, 21 touchdowns in 3 seasons. He had over 800 yards in 2022 and 2023. Last year, he only played in 9 games. Otherwise, he was on pace to hit that mark yet again. So in this mock, we end up with Malachi Starks at 19, Benjamin Morrison at 53, Elijah Roberts at 84, Isaiah Bond at 121, Kobe King at 157, and then Montrell Johnson Jr. at 235. Not quite as good overall as the previous mock, but I think that's due to circumstance. And here's the truth of the matter, and this is why it's a good example as to why I've been kind of pounding the trade back table as of late. This is the difference between, having 6 picks in the top 125 versus 6 picks overall. When you have more chances, when you have more slices of the pie, you can address more needs and build more depth. But without trades, you don't have that option. There's going to be guys at 19 that you like, that I like, that would be great for the Buccaneers. But when you can amass, an extra pick, an extra 2 picks in this draft specifically, that's the move that you really have to make. And without any trades, I think Bucs fans ultimately would be happy with this draft class. I think the Bucs themselves would be happy with this draft class. But again, things could have been different if I hadn't backed myself into a corner with the first pick and allowed that to be my other cautionary tale of this episode. This is why you don't fall in love with a specific position or a specific player in the first round. You could wind up angry or disappointed that the Bucs didn't do what you wanted. But then when the rest of the draft comes together, you'll see that it may have been better that they didn't go in that particular direction at the start. It reminds me a lot of the 2020 draft. I was hyped when they got Tristan in the first round, but then in the second, and maybe some of you longtime everydayers remember this, I was pounding the table for the Bucs to draft J.K. Dobbins. I thought this is the running back that the offense needs to really go over the top. Instead, they took Antoine Winfield Jr., and I thought, are you freaking kidding me? I was blowing up David's phone. I was fuming. Another year where the Bucs don't take a running back in the first 3 rounds. Brady's going to have to rely on Ronald Jones all year. To me, it was a disaster. I was wrong. I was very, very wrong. Dobbins has been injury prone. Antoine Winfield Jr. is one of the best, if not the best safety in the NFL. The Bucs went out and got Leonard Fournette to pair with Rojo, and the rest is history. So always remember, it's the collective. It's not the individual. So do not fall in love with one specific position or one specific player because you don't know how things are going to shake out the rest of draft weekend or the rest of the offseason heading into training camp, even during training camp. So with that, let me know what you think of these mock drafts in the comments section and on Twitter. Coming up over the next few days, we are going to be doing an NFC South roundup. I'm going to be joined by Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons, Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints, and Julian Council of Locked On Panthers to get you all caught up on what's been happening with the rest of the division over the course of the offseason. And the reason for that, I'm going on vacation. We're leaving in a couple of hours after this drops. Wanted to make sure that you guys were still getting plenty of content this week. So you guys are going to learn a lot about the Falcons, the Panthers, the Saints, as far as what they've done, what they still need to do, what their draft approach is going to be, and then find out who you think are going to be the surprise teams in the NFC South based on those other hosts. Until then, please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. And of course, make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.